It's time to pit the brand new 14-inch Razer Blade 14 against the oldie but goodie MacBook Pro 13. And yes, that's how fast technology moves anymore, in that this is not even a year old, yet it's the oldest kid on the block. Both of these computers promise to be very powerful and very portable, and could be fantastic options for the travel worker or somebody that just needs a beefy machine to either run a media creation effort or even do some video gaming. But which one comes out on top? Let's find out. What's up, everyone? I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. I love laptops. I don't know what it is about them, but since I saw my first briefcase-sized computer when I was a kid, I've been hooked on them ever since, and leading us to these two incredible options. And yes, I want to get that out of the way beforehand, that I think both of these are good, probably great computers, and neither of these is a bad choice if you stopped watching right now and went out and bought either of these. Quick disclaimer is that Razer is letting me borrow this 14-inch model for the next couple of weeks. They are not paying me nor dictating anything about this content. Just so you're aware. Oh, this is my personal MacBook Pro 13. Also up front, yes, I understand that these are two separate styles of computers, but for somebody looking to be a creator or having a do-it-all single computer, you could be looking seriously at either of these based on the specs in both of these. They are easily viable options. So yeah, it's not apples to apples, but this is a valuable comparison nonetheless. Starting us off, let's quickly cover the specs and ordering options if you didn't even know Razer made a 14-inch Blade, because it's brand new. It came out last week. The Blade 14 is a middle-size range laptop with a serious-sized processor and GPU combination. This comes equipped with the AMD Ryzen 5900HX, which is an 8-core, 16-thread processor with a 3.3 GHz base clock speed. You'll also be able to choose from a couple of different graphics card options, going from an RTX 3060 all the way up to an RTX 3080. Additionally, this will come with 1TB solid-state drive, 16GB RAM, and a 1080p or QHD fast refresh display. Pricing will start at $17.99 for that 3060 1080p model, going up to $27.99 for the RTX 3080 QHD model. Oof on the prices of laptops. I love them, but dang. On to the MacBook Pro 13. This laptop is rocking the new Apple M1 processor, which is also an 8-core chipset. This doesn't have a dedicated graphics card like the Razer, but this does have an 8-core integrated GPU. This comes standard with 8GB of unified memory, what Apple calls RAM, and a 256GB solid-state drive. That brings the price of this base model to $12.99. You can increase the internal storage and memory of this MacBook to 16GB of RAM and a 2TB solid-state drive, bringing the overall price to $22.99. And just to point out that if we're going to make it as fair as possible, if we're going to match the MacBook Pro to the Razer Blade, so 1TB solid-state drive and 16GB of RAM, that will run this $18.99. So despite where the base and top-end models fall in the pricing model, when they have pretty similar internals, they come pretty close in price. Now that we've got the specs out of the way, let's get to the main comparisons. For laptops, I like to break it down into 3 parts: power, portability, usability. Dang, we're so close to having that be the 3 Ps. So power, portability, practicality? When it comes to power, I think this is going to be the part of the video that is least apples to apples for a comparison. And that's because both of these computers run on very different underlying software architecture, making their specs act a little bit differently than each other, even if we were to run similar pieces of software. The Razer is on a more traditional x86 system, while the MacBook is on an ARM-based system. Now, for the casual user, that doesn't matter at all. It will just run your programs and apps differently under the hood, and you might have some compatibility issues moving from one to the other, but functionally, you're not going to be able to tell a difference. When we look at the straight numbers, though, the Razer is far more powerful. Just at the end of the day, that 5900HX processor is a legit monster. I'm not much for benchmarks, but here on the screen, I'll put a couple of quick Cinebench scores and video rendering scores so you can see an objective measure of how these stack up. And I don't think that's a big surprise that the Razer is a more powerful computer. Generally, these gaming laptops are all about power. So from a pure numbers perspective, the Razer really dominates the MacBook. That's not to say the MacBook is weak. For the size, thermal performance, and battery life, yes, much more on the battery life later, the MacBook holds its own in this comparison, and it does so against many other very powerful processors. And if you aren't doing AAA gaming, I think the MacBook is more than powerful enough to get all sorts of things done, especially work. And as I'm a channel that's kind of dedicated to productivity, work, stuff like that, this has so much power it'll blow your mind. I mean, heck, I run this whole YouTube channel, including photo, video editing, and scripting, and all of the work from my M1 Mac Mini. And I play most of my time in WoW Classic from it. If I were to personally play more top-end video games, I'd probably have a stronger reaction here, but there is a point where more power doesn't really get you all that much. Looks cool on a graph though. Power, if there's one thing we can give power, is that it looks cool on a graph. And what are we doing here on computer YouTube if we're not trying to make things look cool on a graph? Am I right? Up top, me. One thing I want to make a note of before we leave power is I've been using the Razer Blade with the 3060 graphics card. This does have a pretty darn beefy vapor chamber cooling system, and I personally haven't had any issues with thermal throttling or overheating running these tests. But because of the smaller size of the 14, I am curious about how it performs with those bigger GPUs. And before you buy one of those higher end models, I would absolutely check other creators' content to see if there are any thermal issues with those bigger models. Again, I haven't personally seen any, but a 3080 and a 5900HX is a monster combo to put into such a small computer. Okay, on to the portability section. The MacBook Pro is smaller. Section over. All right, everybody, call it a day. Let's dial it in. We're all done. Thank goodness. That's how easy. Look, folks, that's how easy this could be, and I could almost be done. All the work we're going to have to do to edit this video, that could have been it right there. I almost actually typed an LOL into the script here, and that's just how you know how you've been playing WoW Classic way too much recently. Portability can mean lots of things outside of just the size of the machine, and personally, I like to think of it as how much other stuff do I need to make this work the way I want. And here, there isn't really a clear-cut winner for portability. Both laptops are great and make missteps at the same time, which is surprising. Normally, when it comes to portability, there's a very clear winner, but both of these have good and bad to them. The biggest advantage the Razer has is all of the physical I/O built right in. You get an HDMI, you get 2 USB-C and 2 USB-A, which for a small laptop is awesome, and that's just about the right amount. With this amount of port selection, you can easily conduct meetings on a bigger screen, plug in every accessory that you could ever want at the same time, and you don't really need to bring along any dongles. But where the Razer missteps is, because it's a Ryzen chipped laptop, you will miss out on Thunderbolt 3 functionality. So if you want that wider array of accessory support, you'll have to look at either the Mac or one of the Intel-based Razer laptops, which is where the MacBook does better. It might have way less actual ports, but those two ports are Thunderbolt 3 and USB 4, which if you don't have a lot of separate accessories or you move between dock mode at home and laptop mode by itself for traveling, this is actually a pretty useful and easy method to work with. Yes, the MacBook is smaller, but where it missteps, if you do need to give presentations off of your laptop, you will need at the bare minimum an HDMI dongle, and I hate bringing dongles. I've lost so many dongles at the worst moments. They can break, they get lost, and if you are not at your house and you're very worried that something's going to break or get lost because you have a critical meeting, you'll need to bring along extras just in case. Dongles are the worst. They're the worst. I think we can all agree. Let me know in the comments. Just say, I agree, Gary, dongles are the worst. And I really hope that in the future that Apple expands the I/O on their laptops. And last but certainly not least, usability or practicality. This is 100% a subjective section because what I think is practical might not be what you think is practical. And I know YouTube hates subjectivity, but I promise, fam, we'll get through this together. I couldn't get through that without laughing. When it comes to usability, I'm really only looking for a few key things: battery life, typing experience, and just the overall vibe of the laptop. When it comes to battery life, the MacBook Pro is easily the winner. There is still nothing on the market that comes close to reaching the 20 hours of reported battery life here. And basically, what that 20 hours means is you don't have to worry about charging this for a couple of days at a time. For a professional, that's just wild. I still can't get over how much of my own perspective on a devices, be that phone, tablet, or laptops, how much of that usefulness can now come down to its battery life. I mean, remember, portability can mean less stuff to take with you, and because of how long this battery lasts, I legitimately never bring a charging cable or external battery if I'm using my MacBook Pro or my MacBook Air. I mean, this is every single video. We could probably do a supercut of me saying, "That's amazing, it's mind-blowing, it's crazy." You could probably get a very long supercut of that, but okay. And another thing in the kick the Windows laptop while it's down category, while on battery life, you'll get the full M1 processor power here, where on the Razer, you won't. The Razer has perfectly good battery life for a gaming laptop, but you will for the most part need to have it plugged in. If you were at the office, I don't think that would be that big of a hassle because it will last through whatever meeting you might need to unplug it for. But dang, I just love the battery life of the M1s. It's unplugged. This is a laptop unplugged, where even on my work Windows computer, it's always got to be plugged in for the majority of the day. Something else I think the MacBook wins on is an overall noise performance. The M1s are all very quiet, and even when under load, you can barely hear the fan noise, which is impressive considering how small the laptop is for just how powerful that M1 can be. Much like battery life, the M1s they've screwed up my perspective on how loud I'll let a computer I'll personally buy be, it's really tough to articulate that point in these videos because the Razer 14 isn't loud. And I know I've said this so often in recent Windows laptop videos, but the Razer is good for Windows, but compared to the M1, it sounds like a hairdryer. Here, team, if you are a one operating system person and you don't really know the difference here, stay in the bubble. Stay in the bubble as long as you can. It's really frustrating how much I pay attention to this now because of how darn quiet these M1s are. It's so bad, even my new RAID enclosure is driving me crazy because it makes so much more noise than my Mac Mini. The pain is real, folks. When it comes to my favorite function test, typing, I think both are pretty good. I will give the keyboard and the trackpad to the Mac, but I like the layout and the shape of the computer more on the Razer. Both will feel fantastic to type on, which is a pretty big boon to Razer because I'm normally a pretty stubborn and staunch person on this because apparently Apple's keyboards can walk on water as far as I'm concerned and what I talk about in these videos. It just is. And the last usability thing that I want to point out is the overall build material for both computers. Apple's, as you can see right here, it's the standard gray aluminum that looks pretty good. It also looks kind of boring at this point, but it doesn't really collect any fingerprints or smudges while using it. And if you've watched any of these videos before, you probably know where I'm going with on this part now. Razer is using an updated version of their outer shell that is much better for smudges than older models, but it's still roughly the same material. You will still get some fingerprints. Check this out. It's not as bad, but you can absolutely still see them. And we're going to have to clean that now, or that's going to drive me crazy. It is way worse on their older models, believe you me. You might think this is a nitpick or a small thing to bring up. It drives me crazy how a Razer laptop can go from looking so good to look like it's covered in grease stains all in the span of 15 seconds. I love how these laptops look when they're clean. They might be the best looking laptop on the market when it's clean. And if you were going to use this in a professional setting, green logo and all, you'll either need to really stay on top of wiping this down literally every time you move or touch it, or you'll have to get some kind of wrap. Personally, I had a wrap on my older model Razer Blade 15. It wasn't that big of a hassle to put on. But the thing is, it's an extra expense on top of what you've already paid for, which is something that irks me. It's just like the dongle thing, right? I don't like having to buy a dongle to use a computer that I've already bought. It's the same thing with a wrap. But at the end of the day, so what, right? Which of these two laptops comes out on top? Obvious statement, just out of the way first. If you are a Mac user, get the MacBook. And if you are a Windows diehard, get the Razer. But if you are like me and you use both systems at once, there is some surprising nuance here. If you want a laptop strictly for social media creation and only for professional in the office type work, I'll continue to recommend the MacBook Pro 13. The battery life is wild, the power is pretty darn good, and it's so silent you will not irritate your coworkers when you go back into the office. But if you need something to do everything, home computer, work computer, creation, gaming, coding, all of the things that you need in a traditional computer, I would absolutely recommend the Razer Blade 14. This is probably the most powerful small computer that I've ever seen, and more so than my G14, which is the comparison we'll make next week. I really think that this could easily fit into a home office setup one day, a travel rig the next, and an on-the-go gaming laptop if you are also addicted to WoW Classic. You could also really do some great video editing. Look, neither of these are a bad choice, and while I say that often, that doesn't make it any less true, and if you bought either of these, you would be perfectly fine. And if you like this video and you want to see what comes in the box and what my initial impressions were with the Razer Blade 14, good news. I got that video right here for you. You can click right here. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.